a lot of people said to me, well, Ed Miliband's been getting off lightly in your podcast, and I do keep an eye on the Patreon comments and conversations, so I think that's a fair shout. But I sort of wanted a particularly good reason to talk about Ed Miliband, and in fairness, there's probably been a few, but it does turn out recently that in Starmer's reshuffle, he tried to push Ed Miliband, not out, but you notice he tried to demote him to housing. Which is definitely a demotion from energy. And Ed Miliband's so infused about net zero and, green taxes and all that sort of stuff that housing was quite clearly a maybe you should fuck off moment. Maybe go and do one. But he didn't. So the interesting thing is why maybe Starmer was like, look, there's only one adenoidal voice that's allowed in this fucking town, bitch. But he maybe thought he was trampling on his USP. I think the interesting questions that come out of there was like, one, why did he want to demote him, right? And two, why couldn't he sack him? And I deal with the second question first. I wonder how Ed Miliband won that battle. Is it a kind of Dominic Cummings, I know where the bodies are buried. If you do that to me, I'll quit and I'll make life very difficult. Or is he just a bit more experienced and navigating these things?
It's a good question. To be fair, I did hear at the time. I mean, like within 24 hours of the reshuffle, I remember people saying that exactly that they tried to get shot on Miliband and he'd somehow kind of gone, no, I'm not going. I'm not enough of a Westminster operator to understand what bodies he might know and where they're buried. I mean, most of the obvious scandals that affected, the Labour government, or rather the Labour Party in opposition under Jeremy Corbyn, are all fairly visible. And Starmer had proved himself, if nothing else, to be fairly sound in terms of ridding the party of that kind of legacy, even though, of course, he is part of it himself. Ed Miliband is justifiably very unpopular for net zero, but net zero wasn't his invention, of course. Net zero was something that fucking Tories put into legislation and committed the next government to, and it is a catastrophe. Arguably, I don't think there's a single worse part of this government than their commitment to it and the deindustrialization that's coming from it. But unless you get in somebody who was actually equally committed to getting rid of it rather than just going to run it, I don't know that getting rid of Ed Miliband would have made very much difference. I can't remember, was it Andrew? It was my neighbour who'd left that forced the reshuffle, wasn't it?
Oh, Angela Rayner,
Angela Rayner, sorry, not Andrew. Yeah, Angela Rayner, who resigned over a flat in a couple of blocks down south from me. And I dare say she got a decent deal on her council tax, but. I don't know what benefit it would create to the government, but it is weird. And Starmer, as I say, for all the other things that I have issues with him on, he has been reasonably effective in terms of getting rid of people that he feels sort of bringing the party into disrepute. And, as he did eventually with Mandelson, for instance, I think there's a strange disconnect there. Nobody can quite understand how he's still there. But then obviously, you look at Prince Andrew and you, as we'll be coming on to later, the ability of certain people to not understand when they've overstayed their welcome is extraordinary.
One of the things with Miliband is that what he's got to understand is that they sort of promised people that their bills would be £300 cheaper by the end of the Parliament, right? But the problem with public, if you make a retail political offering, what the public hears is £300 cheaper, right? So a lot of them would have just thought, well, it will start getting cheaper. And it hasn't. It's gone up, energy bills have gone up by about an average of 185 quid. So it's going absolutely in the opposite direction and a lot faster than the rate of reduction that was promised, right? So apparently what they might be looking at is taking, so VAT on energy bills is 5%. And so they might be taking that off. That's fucking nothing, man. That literally won't feel like that. It's a good thing to have to say, but it doesn't mean anything. I don't think that's going to take the pressure off him. And then the other pressure that he's under is that, there's this find off the North Sea, Rosebank or something. I don't know. Maybe that was. Am I now quoting the mum out of Citizen Kane? Rosebud? I don't know. Orson Welles' mum has been found off in the North Sea.
No, you've lost me now. Sorry, what's been found?
So there was an oil find, but they got called in, and there was the application was denied, and so there's an appeal. And so the theory goes that when the appeal comes across the desk of the Energy Secretary, they want someone there that's not going to say no because we need fucking money, and the unions want the jobs. So the idea was to muscle out Ed, and this isn't a new license, but obviously Labour had that blanket thing of we're not going to grant any new licenses. I mean, we do feel like the only country in the world that would have said that at this point in time. But so maybe I just feel like he's going to have to go at some point. Unpopular guy who's going to get in the way of revenue. It doesn't feel like that can last.
I mean, we're in a really bad situation now, as everyone has come to realise over the last year. You know, we thought that maybe there was a point maybe where you could just kid yourself that, you know, Labour put in the painful budget right at the start of the term, so you'd have forgotten about it by the end. But obviously, it's not patching up. By a lot of metrics, Britain is not even a rich country anymore. The idea that we're taking some sort of moral lead in the G7 by going green, and that, you know, there's going to be a couple of years of transition, but everyone's going to go, actually, Britain was quite clever there because they're now like world leaders in solar and wind and wave and sustainable bullshit. You know, we are very much, you know, putting turmeric in our coffee as we sink beneath the waves at the moment. It's, you know, when you look at like the GDP per capita compared to like countries like Australia, never mind the big like world leaders in you know, like America and China carving up all the tech future. And China, of course, I mean, there's a guy called Noah Smith, writes a blog under No Opinion. Don't know if you know him. He's like probably the world's most popular economic substack. And he's pointed out that China are actually going to save the world in terms of, if you believe it, that solar, if you believe in the whole climate thing and don't think it's all a scam. And there's you know, room for doubt on the whole thing. You know, I watched a clip the other day of a bloke saying, if there really were, if the world really was braced for climate change of the order that we're talking about, and the rising sea levels that would come as a consequence, you would start to see that filtering through in the prices for which beachfront property was changing hands. You know, you would get warnings to investors and bank loans and mortgages and so on if you were trying to build a condominium on a certain beach in Florida. You know, and there's none of it. There's absolutely nothing. There's no concern whatsoever experienced at the financial market level, which leads me to suspect that the whole thing is inflated. But even if it were, China is far more likely to be the savior of the world, because by chucking billions of tons of coal into its electrical power generators, it's creating the kind of level of industrial output which is going to bring the economies of scale and make solar panels affordable. You know, that's how you go for it. You know, and that was the position that Britain was in 5 or 10 years ago. That we could be world leaders in biotech. We could be world leaders in all kinds. You know, you can actually make the units that allow people to build sustainable energy, but you cannot just run on it until it's ready. You know, we've totally put the cart before the horse, and literally nobody in the world is looking at Britain right now and going, do you know what? Britain has shown a bit of moral fibre and we need more of that in this country. We're just a laughing stock.
We are world leaders in taking a moral lead on things. See, we're going to talk about Zach Polanski now. So one of the things about net zero, I've always thought, is there's just, I was also suspicious of the absolutism of it, because it just feels good to say net zero. For some reason, those two words work well together.
Like zero tolerance, isn't it? It makes you feel like you've shown you've suddenly woken up to a threat.
Yeah, it's like one of those mantras often found on the left, but increasingly on the right too. But that just are appealing. You know, trans woman is the things that people like saying. No one's safe till everyone's safe, which is just bollocks.
Love
it's
is
never
love.
True. One death is too many. Just love it. Just shut the fuck up. Like the nuance-free phrases, and so net zero is obviously something Zach Polanski is. Well, I mean, he will think Ed Miliband's not going nearly far enough, and. He was asked, and this is good now, because he is an effective communicator in some ways, Zach Polanski. He's gaining traction, he's gaining poll ratings and stuff. But he was asked how you're going to pay for it, and he just went wealth tax. And I just thought that's a fucking mantra to answer a mantra. So net zero, okay, how are you going to pay for that? Wealth tax. How are you going to pay for that? None of us are safe till all of us are safe. The thing is, with wealth tax, I am not super right. I always say this. I would love to have more of Elon Musk's money. I would like anybody that's got more than 10 million quid. I would love to use that money to bring down all of my costs and make my life better. It would be mental to not want that. I just don't think it's going to fucking work. That's in many ways, it reminds me of what makes me a conservative is that thing of seeing the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. Like most people, it's almost everybody that's not super wealthy. But the question is whether or not wealth tax, when it's put to them that there's no evidence of it having worked anywhere, they just sort of brush past it, and you think maybe you don't think it will work. Maybe that's the honest truth, is you just kind of want to do it anyway.
Well, I mean, there's different kinds of. There was a lovely quote, I think, from Rachel Reeves saying we're not going to introduce a wealth tax, but there are ways of taxing the wealthy that we're looking at. I mean, this is the way that it's being phrased, and obviously Polanski, at least to his credit, I suppose, is not attempting to cloak that wolf in sheep's clothing. It's a it was the fear about democracy when it was first introduced, wasn't it, 100 years ago, when you moved to a sort of universal suffrage, that you're effectively saying, it's two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for dinner, and that the attempt to just redistribute wealth will be sort of baked into it. And we've managed to resist it for a long time, but they've done it. If they do introduce it, obviously we've already seen, there are loads more millionaires, departing the shores of Britain, and there are going to be a huge number of voters, especially in the sort of whatever it is, the early, whether it's 16 or 18 to 25 range, who, for instance, look at the property prices around the country and especially in London right now and go, this is good. If all the millionaires leave, that will effectively have a trickle-down effect on property prices across the country, and we'll be able to afford to get on the ladder. Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing. People have been warning for a very long time that under the 14 years of Tory rule, if you allow property prices to remain out of reach of ordinary, hardworking, ambitious people who just want to settle down, start a family, and be able to sort of have a little starter home, if you put that beyond their reach, then you will radicalize them. There's nothing more radicalizing than knowing that you're not able to buy your own home. So, that will be popular, but the long-term effects will be absolutely catastrophic. That is essentially indistinguishable from the policies that destroy communism.